Hey guys, Pete here and welcome to Knife Talks. Today we've got something very special. It's the long-awaited knife laws episode. We're going to be talking about where you can go to find your state's or your county's particular knife laws, as well as several other things. We're also going to include some interpretations because it is a really legal matter that's a pain in the ass to read through all of this legal jargon. And so I went through and spent the time to review everything and give you my best interpretation of the facts as they are written to try and help you get an understanding for them. However, quick disclaimer, I am not in any way responsible if you go and act under the assumption that what I have told you is fact and something goes wrong and you are, incarcerated or what have you under legal circumstances. I'm telling you my interpretation. My interpretation may easily be wrong. I think it's a very good interpretation, but I am by no means saying that it is fact. It is how I interpret it, and unfortunately, even if it was fact, that doesn't actually mean anything because things will be reinterpreted in court, new precedents can be set, and things will be overruled, so keep that in mind. Also, I want to apologize real quick. As you can see, we're on my computer today, so all I have for audio is my built-in microphone for my webcam, so unfortunately, audio quality won't be great. With that being said, let's jump right into it. I've got a couple tabs up top here, but I'm going to show you how I got to all of them. So first things first, hop on over to your favorite search engine, Google. Now, what you're looking for are your state's or your county's laws, your statutes. For me, if I search, because I'm in New Jersey, if I search New Jersey legislature, as you can see, I've been here before. We're looking for laws, legislature. That's where we're going. You're going to find yourself at a site that looks roughly 15 years out of date, but whatever. We're going to power through it here. I'm going to walk you through where to go. If you look over here at this side panel, you've got all these hotkeys, all these quick links. That's what we're looking for. You see laws and constitution. That is what we're looking for. Not chapter laws, not constitution, statutes. At least for the state of New Jersey, it is a little different depending on the state. I've looked up things for California and for New York, and all three are completely different than, both of those are completely different than New Jersey, unfortunately. And they each come with their own difficulties in searching, but we'll get to that another day perhaps. So for New Jersey, when you hop on that link to the New Jersey legislature, what you're going to find is this lovely little document view frame that has a built-in search engine. This makes your life so much easier because, as you can see down here, we have 104,000 records. So to speed things up, what are you looking for? Well, chances are you're looking for knife laws. So you're going to search for knife. Then with that, you're going to be presented with this nice, short, concise list of links, which even show you a brief description of what's in each, where the term is found, and the title of each section. You see you've got definitions, prohibited weapons and devices, exemptions, and sale of knives to minors. All four of these are up here, along with a couple of the things that I'll get to momentarily. So I'm going to close that down. Oh, I've got duplicates. That's why I have those. There we go. So first things first, you've got your definitions, prohibited weapons, sale, and some other things for exemptions. Definitions is very important. You're always going to want this up because if you come across something that says, for example, possession of a gravity knife is a crime of the third degree, what the hell is a gravity knife? You can find that right down here. What's a crime of the third degree, which isn't in this document particular, but it is later on. So keep that up, though you won't need it right yet. First thing you're probably going to want to look at is your prohibited weapons and devices. This is normally the question that everyone has. Can I carry a switchblade? Can I own a switchblade? Can I carry a balisong? Things like that. This is where you're going to want to go. I don't know if it's going to be called the same thing, if it'll have the same title. It definitely won't be the same section, subsection, so don't bother with that in a different state. But it will probably be a similar heading title. So that could be a good place to start. Now, prohibited weapons and devices. All of the below are classified as prohibited weapons and devices. You have to know how to read these documents. It can be very confusing. You've got a lot of sections, subsections, and then sub-subsections. It's very confusing, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step. You have your prohibited weapons and devices. You're not worried about destructive devices, sawn-off shotguns, silencers, yada, yada, yada. Certain weapons or other weapons, as you might see it sometimes. So what it says verbatim. Any person who knowingly is important, has in his possession any gravity knife, switchblade knife, dagger, dirk, stiletto, all of these other things that you're probably not going to have on you, ballistic knife, without any explainable lawful purpose, is guilty of a crime of the fourth degree. A couple different things in this one little sentence here. First off, the things that you can't have. The things that are going to affect us, you and me as knife owners: gravity knife, switchblade knife, dagger, dirk, stiletto, and ballistic knife. Next thing you have is a condition: without any explainable lawful purpose, and lastly is the crime level, which is a crime of the 4th degree. So let's break this down. First off, definitions. As always, that's why I've got this guy over here. Gravity knife. What's a gravity knife by definition for my state? A gravity knife means any knife which has a blade which is released from the handle or sheath thereof by the force of gravity or the application of centrifugal force. This is horribly written. This is incredibly vague, and it's very annoying. First off, little pet peeve, centrifugal force, anyone who's taken high school physics, there's no such thing as the centrifugal force. It's an imaginary force. That bugs me, but regardless, I digress. So, any knife which has a blade which is released from the handle or sheath by the force of gravity, or should be centripetal force. What that means, what they're trying to cover there, is things like butterflies, ballistogs. That centripetal force is the act of you flipping it out and rotating it. That's centripetal force, centrifugal force if you want. Force of gravity, I don't know any knives that are operated solely by the force of gravity, but okay, I'm not really sure what would be classified as that beyond maybe just a ballistog. Anyway, technically speaking, I can open every single one of my knives, barring 1 or 2 exceptions, with centripetal force. That's just snapping your wrist out quickly. If I have a slightly too light detent and I give it a good enough snap, I can open any knife that way. Anything that isn't a slip joint can be opened in that manner for the most part. So that's a really stupidly vague definition, but unfortunately that's what you're dealing with here. Next up, you've got your switchblades. Another thing a lot of people want to own but probably can't in their areas. So the state of New Jersey defines a switchblade as any knife or similar device which has a blade which opens automatically by hand pressure applied to a button, spring, or other device in the handle of the knife. Now, this does not explicitly state a differentiation between an assisted opening knife and an automatic knife, or in this case a switchblade knife. However, it kind of implies one, and that's this portion right here. Hand pressure applied to a button, spring, or other device in the handle of the knife. This is not applying pressure to the blade of a knife. Now, President Obama in the last year or two, I want to say probably 2 years ago, issued a statement for, I think it's for the sake of import laws, but has broad-reaching implications because you could reference it in a legal case if it ever came up. He basically, finally, at long last, stated a difference between an assisted opening knife and an automatic knife. And basically what it comes down to is the natural position of the knife. If that natural position is closed, it's an assisted knife. If that natural position is open, it is an automatic knife. What I mean by that, take something like the Kershaw leak. If you've ever owned an assisted opening knife, you know that if you press on it slowly, it takes a little bit of motion and it has to pass past a certain angle before the spring takes over and kicks it out the rest of the way. That means the natural position is closed. Any spring force acting on it isn't trying to open it until the user initiates and pushes it past a certain threshold. It naturally wants to remain closed. If you took the detent out of that, it would stay closed. On the other hand, if you take the detent, or in this case it's basically a locking bar, out of a switchblade, it opens. Its natural position is open. It is under constant spring pressure when it is closed. The only reason it isn't open is because there is a bar or a safety mechanism in the way. The user removes that safety mechanism, generally by application of pressure to a button or similar device in the handle, as it states here, and that's what opens the knife. That's the difference. So yes, switchblades are not allowed in the state of New Jersey, but also assisted opening knives are technically allowed. The issue with this is that not everyone who's not a knife person understands this difference. Hell, most people who are knife people don't know the technical definition of the difference. So if I'm an officer of the law who doesn't know much about knives and I see you whip out something that's an assisted opening knife, I'm going to call it a switchblade. I would be wrong, but it doesn't matter, and as I'll explain later, that's a bad situation to be in. So keep that in mind. It's interpretation, and you can still be arrested even if you're correct, even if you know the law better than the officer, which you most likely will, and I'll explain that later too. You can still be fined for that, so keep that in mind. Alright, moving on. Enough about that. Let's see. Ballistic knife is the next one up, which not a lot of people use, not a lot of people own for obvious reasons, though I have seen a bit of a resurgence in them online forums and whatnot of people trying to sell them. So a ballistic knife means any weapon or other device capable of lethal use excuse me, and which can propel a knife blade. Now that's kind of vague. I can propel a knife blade with my hand with lethal use, with lethal use. So I'm not really sure why that's worded that way, but it is. We all know what they're talking about. It's basically the handle is basically a hollow pipe that has a really heavy spring in it. You force the tang the knife into that, and it locks into place. You unlock it, it shoots off. That's a typical ballistic knife. This definition could apply to you throwing a pair of scissors. I don't know how better to put it than this, though, so whatever is what it is. Most people don't have these anyway. Now, that pretty much covers all prohibited weapons and devices that deal with knives. There are a lot of other important, interesting things in here, but we'll talk about that later, I suppose, just because there's really not much else here that we need to talk about for today. If you have other interests, please by all means check it out, but for now, I think this will be fine. Next thing we have here. Now, there's this common myth, I guess is the better, or old wives' tale for how long your knife can be, the whole palm of your hand thing, or the 3 inches, or the 5 inches. State of New Jersey, that's bullshit. That's not a thing, doesn't exist. What they're referencing is what I'm about to show you right here, and they're improperly quoting a completely different law. That law is for the sale of knives to minors, and it states explicitly, a person who sells any hunting, fishing, combat, or survival knife having a blade length of 5 inches or more, or an overall length of 10 inches or more, to a person under 18 years of age, sale of, commits a crime of the 4th degree. And I'll get to the exceptions in a moment. The only mention of blade length in the entire document, all 104,000 records here, is for sale to minors. You are 100% legally allowed to own, possess, and carry a knife, so long as it doesn't fit into the other categories we just talked about for prohibited weapons, of any blade length you darn well please, so long as it doesn't violate any other laws, at any age, and that's it. This says nothing about owning under the age of 18. A 16-year-old is allowed to own a 12-inch combat knife, absolutely allowed to. By this document anyway, it in no way says that he can't. The only thing you can't do is buy it at the age of 18. I believe there's something similar with cigarettes where you can't buy it until you're X years old, but you can still smoke them whenever. It's weird. But yeah, that's the only thing here. So if a father gives his son a combat knife, totally allowed. If you give someone else a combat knife and they're under 18, totally allowed, so long as there's no exchange of currency for it. As long as they're not buying it from you, you're not selling it to them. Unless this entire blurb is basically saying they either show you some state identification, whether it's a driver's license, a state ID card, social security card, something that would make you believe reasonably that they're over the age of 18 years or older, or that their physical appearance is, was such that an ordinary person would believe him to be 18 years of age or older. So if he looks like a 30-year-old man with a full beard and mustache, you're probably not going to have an issue. But yeah, this is the only mention of blade length in this entire document, so that's really important to note. There's some other interesting things here, handcuffs, etc. But this is the main thing right here. That is really where that old wives' tale of, oh, the width of your palm is as long as your knife can be. That's bullshit. That's not true at all, which is quite disappointing. Last thing we have up here are the exemptions. It's a decent-sized document with a lot of jibber-jabber in here, but to quickly summarize, the main thing this is saying is if you are law enforcement, if you're a sheriff, federal law enforcement officer, state law enforcement officer, a member of the armed forces, these prohibited weapons don't apply to you. If you're a federal agent, you can carry a switchblade, a balisong, all of the above, and I believe also a ballistic knife wherever you may please. There are some exceptions, and I am paraphrasing a lot, but that is basically what all of this is saying. This doesn't apply to most people, but if you're an officer of the law, yes, you're allowed to buy, purchase, carry, transport those weapons. There was one other thing. See, what's nice is that my document view frame that comes from this site continues to highlight the key term that you search down here throughout the documents, so you can quickly scroll through and find what you're looking for. All this is saying is that if you're carrying a knife or a firearm for the purpose of hunting or fishing, or I believe it also mentions target practice, I guess camping might fit here, though it doesn't explicitly say it, so I won't go that far. So long as you have a valid hunting license and the tool or weapon you're carrying is appropriate for such use, that you're okay. So if you have a 12-inch combat knife and you're on, hunting grounds, it's a legal knife for that purpose, you'll have no problems. Or if you're transporting such a weapon or firing knife, I can't speak today, such a weapon, a firearm or a knife, you'll be okay. Now, the last thing that I'm not going to talk about too much, I just want to brush up, is the use of force in self-protection or self-defense. First off, the thing I wanted to tell you, if you search for self-defense, you will not find what you're looking for. To prove that to you, let me Control-Shift-T to get that tab back, a very useful tip for those of you who don't know. This is the document view frame search bar where we search for the term knife. If I search for self-defense, right there, if I search for self-defense, you're going to get all these links, but it's not what you think they are. A lot of these have to do with self-insurance, things like that, education, you've got agriculture, domestic animals, self-incrimination, and the defense of immunity. Not what you're looking for. The legal term for the state of New Jersey is self-protection. I don't know if that's ubiquitous for all states, but for New Jersey it is, and that took a little bit of figuring out. But then right there you get exactly what you're looking for, a section titled Use of Force and Self-Protection. I will not get into this now. This is probably an entire other video because there is a lot here. But I want to show you one thing, and that's 2C3-4B subsection 1A. The use of force is not justifiable under this section. So A and B explain what you're not allowed to use this self-defense for. To resist an arrest, which the actor knows is being made by a peace officer in performance of his duties, although the arrest is unlawful, unless the peace officer employs unlawful force to effect such arrest. What that means, if you know and the officer knows that the arrest that's being made is bullshit, for whatever reason, whatever scenario you want to think of, you are not legally allowed to resist. You have to let him cuff you, you have to let him take you away and arrest you. If you do not, you are actually resisting arrest, you are in violation of the law. That's the facts. So when you keyboard warriors out there see those videos of people getting beat up by cops and want to shit on the cops for what they're doing, oh, he's not resisting, he's not doing anything, well, guess what? Even if they have no right to arrest him, if he resists, they have the right to arrest him because he's breaking the law. By definition, even if it's an unlawful arrest, you do not have the right to resist that arrest at all, unless they're using unlawful force. So use your own discretion here, but if a cop is blatantly malicious and is trying to arrest you for the sake of beating you to death or raping you if you're a woman, because unfortunately there have been cases where things like that have happened in the past, use your own discretion. But this is a scary section here. This is worrying, but I can understand why. Because you get so many cases here where people pretend to know the law or think they know the law when they really don't, and the officer's just has to do what they have to do, and he can't sit there for 3 hours until they call an attorney and check and then let the guy go. That's not an option. They have to act. So I can understand why this law is here. So my only advice to you is if you're ever in that situation, comply 100%. Shove your ego up your ass for 5 minutes, be polite, be courteous, sort things out at the station house, pull up your phone when you are allowed to, don't start reaching in your pockets for no reason, and say, I will show you the exact section, subsection, and paragraph that says I'm allowed to do whatever I was doing, please release me or there will be legal complications. Don't be an asshole about it, it's not the cop's fault, he's just trying to do his job. This is the main thing I wanted to show you about this. There are a lot of things in here about self-defense, of other people, of yourself, of your property, of others' property that they have legal claim to, retaking your property. It's a very in-depth section that it really can't do justice to it if I were to skim it, and I want to try and limit the amount of time this video is going to take. So I think that's probably where I'm going to leave it for now. The one other thing I do want to mention, which is about this in general, is that you're now more educated than most police officers are in my state and in probably any state. There's no requirement that says to become an officer of the state of New Jersey, you must read and memorize the entire statute of limitations, the entire statutes of that state, the entire constitution, all of the laws. That's not a thing. Unfortunately, what that means is that you may rightfully know that you're allowed to carry an assisted opening knife, but the officer may not. And it's not his fault per se. It disappoints me because how are you supposed to enforce a law that you yourself don't even know properly? So politely educate them. If they are actually incorrect, and you are 100% certain, say, look, I will hand this knife over to you, but I'm going to ask that you wait with me for a moment. Allow me to pull out my phone, show you our state statutes, our state constitution, our state's laws, show you exactly where it says I'm allowed to carry this. I will explain it to you, and then I'll go about my way. But please don't confiscate this. Don't arrest me. I'll explain to you why this is not the case and why it's okay for me to carry this. It's not necessarily the officer's fault, but it is a shortcoming of them, and you need to be aware of that. You will be most likely more educated than they are in these matters. So keep that in mind. Be polite, be courteous, and don't do anything stupid. But I think that's mostly what I have to say for now. That covers pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about. You've got your exceptions, you've got your prohibited items, your definitions. You can look this all up on your own. I made a quick little cheat sheet over here that just kind of summarizes the different categories and stuff. And you can make your own for reference. Always check this up on your own. Don't just take my word for it. Don't take someone else's word for it. And again, like I said before, don't even take an officer's word for it. Do your own research, because at the end of the day, this is what matters. This is the law. This is what's going to be argued in court, not, well, Jim from down the street said I was allowed to carry this, or Pete from the internet said I was fine. Even Officer Joe said I could carry this. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything at all. You believed him. That's your fault, not the officer's. As long as he blatantly wasn't trying to deceive you, it's your fault. So keep that in mind, do your own research, and protect yourself by knowing the laws for everything and anything that you're carrying. I think that just about covers it, guys. So as always, thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this special episode of Knife Talks. Maybe we'll even make its own series where I'll go through all 50 states and talk about the knife laws in those states and talk about, different interpretations and different updates and stuff like that. So we'll see. Leave a comment down below if you think you'd want to see that, or leave a comment down below if you've heard something differently, or if you want to discuss something you've seen here that disagrees with what you've seen elsewhere, because I have seen these laws misquoted on other websites, so keep that in mind. As always, guys, thanks again for watching, and remember, keep your edge sharp and your mind sharper, and I'll see you next time.